Hello, all. Welcome to the other edition of South Talkies podcast. And today we have Kumar Raja with me. This is Hari. Today's topic we actually, haven't planned a specific structure and all, but the topic and the person continues to charm us, for more than 3 decades, and he's none other than Mani Ratnam. So this is going to be a free-flowing discussion on Mani Ratnam's career, the choices he has made in terms of his movies, the impact he has created and some recent allegations about his supposedly right wing allegiance. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Maniratnam, one of our favorite directors and most eminent directors of the past 3 decades. Hello, Kumar. Welcome back. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. So, yeah, there are two reasons why we wanted to do this discussion. The one is that I wanted to share some thoughts after watching Kannathil Muttamittal over last weekend. And the other, incidentally, more or less around the same time, there was an article by one Mr. Rajesh Rajamani on the Huffington Post, which goes on to explain how Maniratnam, in a lot of his films, despite being known to sort of have a left leaning liberal image, actually subtly endorses or pushes the RSS BJP Hindutva agenda. So I found the article both convincing and unconvincing at a lot of points. I thought this would be a great chance to discuss Mani Ratnam's work with two talking points. Talking point number one is Mani Ratnam has done stories that a lot of people would never have touched or never have thought about in the contemporary Tamil and Indian film industry. The second is maybe explore the themes that he has looked at in these movies. Some of the we can look at some of the points that Rajesh Rajamani has touched upon, and maybe share our own opinion or viewpoints on that. So, do you want to go first? I mean, have you watched Kannathil Muttamittal? Did you like it? What did you think about it? I know it's been some time since the movie released.
Yeah, of course. I like the movie. Before getting into Kanathil Muttamittal, I just wanted to ask you this question, right? Has there been any other director who has done a range of stories like Maniratnam has? Maybe I thought it'd be useful to pick one great director from the previous era and one his contemporary and compare, how their careers panned out. If you take Balachandar from the previous era, he sort of did all these relationships, drama, and similar stories. I mean, he was obviously a legend at that. And if you pick, Bharati Raja, he did mostly, village-based stories and so on. One fascinating thing that I find when I just look at Maniratnam's filmography is the a whole range that he showcased and he continues to do even now. And there are planned his next planned venture is of course Ponniyin Selvan and so on. Do you think he had the best collection of stories amongst any Tamil directors ever? Is that an exaggeration?
I wouldn't call that an exaggeration at all. Actually, it's a very fair point. He has indeed made movies spanning across different genres. If you look at the 80s, right, and we look at some of the early films he did, he was very much in line with in the themes and the movies that directors were making at that time. Love stories or action stories within the commercial format which people were making at that point in time. But I think somewhere around Maunaragam, he flipped a switch and he decided that from this point on, I will be making movies in my own style. And going from there, I think it's just a very interesting range, right? He did Nayagan, which is a biography, and then immediately switched over to Agni Nakshatram, which was a commercial entertainer, which probably gave a template for filmmakers to look at for years to come. And then it just the list goes on and on. He then I think actually, and then around with Roja, he turned a corner, and then he did things that I don't think a lot of Tamil movie directors have done till now. And every time he explored his genre, it was something that nobody had thought of before, and something that people would emulate in the times to come.
Let's get back to Kanathal Muttamittal, right? So obviously, I'm a big fan of the movie. What really stood out for me in Kanathil Muttamittal was that when I wanted to understand the issue and background, the core issue in general, the whole Tamil Elam struggle and the associated issues and problems and history. There's actually very little, credible material in the internet or anywhere else, apart from the books, of course, if you were to pick on them. It might be due to censorship and it might be due to various other reasons, but it just sort of amplified what a sensitive, significant, and dangerous topic it is for some mainstream filmmaker to pursue. So my first opinion about Kannathil Muttamital, we can get into the movie and the making and the cinema experience as such, but the fact that Mani Ratnam chose this movie in the first place, that he thought it to be made, that itself sort of uh, answers all the questions about that movie, I guess. I never thought even for 1 second that Mani Ratnam was um, journaling what happened in Sri Lanka and so on, right? So if you actually take his filmography straight from Roja, Bombay, Dil Se, and Kannathil Muttamittal, if you want to call them the four terrorism-based movies that he has taken, he has always shown at the center of his plot, some sort of human relationship, tangling. He never focused on the bigger picture of the conflict as such. In Roja, it was always about Madhubala trying so hard to get her husband back. And in Bombay, I know the whole angle that Bombay approaches, right? The whole Hindu-Muslim conflict. But at the core of it, it is still the family that gets caught in the violence and so on, right? And that is consistent in pretty much every movie that he has made. He seems to focus on the human relationship and people who get caught in the bigger picture. And I don't think you can blame him for not capturing the events with historical accuracy and so on. That's why I sort of found the article to be little unrealistic in its expectations of what the movie is supposed to be. It's more like what you see as a context or a background. It's should he shouldn't really be held accountable for not showcasing the facts accurately or having to take sides and so on. He was just showing the feelings of a girl who got separated from her mother and what happens when the adopted family goes and visits her roots. The rest is all up to our imagination, I would assume. And the biggest success of the movie is actually ensuring that it didn't seed any biased thoughts in anyone's mind. The fact that it has been blamed for pushing things into the background, I thought it was by design, and that's what worked for me. You really don't want to make a propaganda movie, ironically, which is what the article is blaming Maniratnam for.
Okay, maybe I'll just spend 2 minutes on that before we talk a little bit more about Kannathil Muttamital and go to the sort of allegation about Mani Ratnam's larger filmography. So to come back to your point, yes, of course, all of Mani Ratnam's movies, in fact, have the underlying. I don't know, current of love. Love story is always the basis of all of his stories, right? And in this story, it is a love of a daughter for the mother, compared to all other stories, where there is a romantic interest involved. But the only point that I think the author was trying to say in that article was that, see, there was a side of the uh, how do you say, the Edom fighters to be shown, and they're shown doing whatever they are doing, but the army's face was not shown at all as to why they are doing whatever they are doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would be fair to say that Mani Ratnam, given the influence and command that he has over his craft and his fans, maybe he should make, uh, he should probably push the so-called right side of the story, right? So maybe it's a grievance that he didn't utilize the medium that he chose to speak things that would impact a lot of people. Let's say like Paranjit, but to actually blame him for not having done it seriously and also pin it as a problem with the cinema was a little too far fetched in my opinion.
Okay. So we will let the discussion go at for Kanatil Muttamitala at this point. So let's go to the larger filmography. What did you think of the criticism starting? I think it starts from Maunaragam itself. He goes not necessarily in the chronological order, but he has criticism of points from Maunaragam to Nayagan to Roja, and then to I think Bombay and Alaipayude. I mean, almost actually all of his major films, right? I don't think any of the films were left out. So, what did you think of the criticism in that larger context?
Yeah, I think a lot of the criticism is mostly revisionism. It seems sort of, I think, if the listeners of the podcast know my stand on where I stand in terms of this right wing extremism, right? If you heard us talk about Hayram and also, I absolutely loathe the whole, the Hindutva ideology or the extremism. Not necessarily the ideology, but how it has become a tool with our current rulers in terms of pushing the agenda and the whole Hindu terrorism that they unleash and so on, right? So, whatever I speak now shouldn't be seen as an excuse for them. But I would also like to say that it has become a recent fad that you pick on any successful celebrity and showcase them as a right wing ideology propagator. So, my first impression about this article was that the agenda for the article was sent and the details were filled, later. A lot of these references that the author makes, they all looked force fit. The one that I laughed at was the uh, Karthik's communist involvement in Maunaragam and how apparently that was shown in a lesser light and how he was shown in a bad light and so on. So I can probably pick on every point that the author has made, and it all felt like sort of a force fitting to a chosen agenda. Um, on the whole, there were some points which I can agree, but it felt like you go back and you can probably make everything aligned to your agenda, and that's what the author had done. I sort of agreed on the hyper nationalism point, even though I don't agree that it is a bad thing. You can obviously arouse nationalistic sentiments in movies. Definitely the themes of hyper-nationalism and you can probably call it a bit of anti-federalism also, as the author has called. But of all the other themes, something that came closer to truth or something came closer to the things that I agreed was on the hyper-nationalism. This whole Indianness and anti-Indianness that the author spoke about, I can little bit get along with it, but I honestly don't know why it is a bad thing to be a nationalist. But given the current intertwining of right wing ideologies and hyper nationalism, maybe the author I thought had some points there.
Okay, did you specifically have a problem with any of the films? Can you talk about that?
I never had any problems with Mani Ratnam's film. Again, in fact, the one thing that the article actually has done is kind of showcased what different kind of stories Mani Ratnam has done. I still repeat, but I just see Mani Ratnam's movies as love stories or relationship stories set in a larger context. And this article has not changed that opinion. I can comment about how some of the movies that he has done have not been good from the cinematic experiences, but from ideology perspective, I did not have any problem with any of this. Did you have any problems?
I do agree with some of the criticism. There is some genuine criticism. So this is not directly to Mani Ratnam, but I think one of the movies mentioned in the article was Indra, which was directed by Suhasini Mani Ratnam. and the criticism of that movie is very genuine. So if you look at the story of the movie, it is actually about a Dalit girl who comes up in politics after her father is killed. But the depiction of the movie has its own problems. If you look at the way that, so I think primarily the movie is between a fight between, let us say, the Dalits and somewhat of the, like the article calls out, intermediate castes. Uh, if you see the depiction of the movie, it is not at all realistic. It is almost like a fantasy land. And Suhasini Maniratnam was criticized at that point in itself. When she was told that, when she was criticized that, this is not a good depiction of Dalits, and this is not how real life is, and she shot back saying, you know what, I don't expect criticism from whatever. I don't recollect exactly what she said. She said that it's enough if my family or some select group of people criticize me. I will only take their opinions or whatever. So I think the criticism of the movie Indra is very genuine. It does have its valid moments though. So I think there is a dialogue where Anu Hassan says to a judge or somebody or an election officer that he will never understand how she and her people feel. That was a very genuine moment, and it also it showcases a lot of struggles that people from lower caste actually face in their everyday life. But I think Suhasini also trivializes a lot of things, and her depiction is sometimes way off reality. That I think Indra is a very problematic film for a lot of reasons, and it also at some point condones, the violence from the how do I say, dominant group of people, saying that, what, these things happen, etc., etc., and some kind of that. So Indra was a very problematic film. Looking back, there was also, I think, there was a criticism of the depiction of Kalanyar Karunanidhi and MGR in Iruvar, which I do not agree with. I think the whole point, I don't know if people remember this, or they have read about this. The original title of Iruvar was Anandan. So the movie was actually focused on MGR with uh, Karunanidhi as a secondary protagonist. The movie was going to be NGR's story, but because Karunanidhi plays such a major role in it, is why he gets so much screen time. And I did not have a problem specifically with the depiction. And there was a point that, the anti-Hindi imposition movement was just showcased to, act as a scene of introduction for Tabu's character, which I don't agree with. I think in making a movie like Iruvar, you will have to pack so many details from history into possibly 2 hours, and with knowing Mani Ratnam's style, and as you referenced, that there is always the underlying current in the movie is the love and the relationship. So it could have been just used as a plot device. I think a lot of things are passed over like that. If you might have a problem with something like that in Iruvar, so I don't see to it. So Indra is a movie I have a problem with. Kannathil Muthumettal, I've already voiced my concerns. The other movie I had a problem with is far more recent, which was Kaatru Veliyidai. Kaatru Veliyidai, in my view, is focused on the relationship between the character of Karthis and Aditi Rao Hydari. But I think the introduction of the army, and even the introduction of the army was sort of fine, because I thought it sort of added a layer to Karthi's character. But the whole capture in Pakistan, the POW experience, and his escape, and before I even read Rajesh Rajamani's article, right, when I watched the movie in the theater, I didn't see the point why, Karti's flag had to break down. Karti's truck had to break down the Pakistani flagpole, and the flag had fall. I mean, yeah, people were very happy in the theater, but I just didn't feel that it sort of blended in with the story. I didn't have a problem with that happening, but I thought it was I thought it was too much of a force fit to, I don't know, maybe appease any sentiments and all of that. And specifically with OK Kanmani, I don't have any problem with the caste equation in it, but I didn't think it was a great movie. And maybe we can talk about that a little later. But I think I've spoken for too long now, and maybe you can say anything that you've been wanting to.
Yeah. So, is it fair to say that the author thinks Mani Ratnam has reduced some of the key political ideologies to a ridiculously low level? Is that the major gripe? Um,
What do you think?
I think so. I mean, this is almost like he's holding him accountable for, not showcasing some of these ideologies in the range that the author expects him to. I don't know if it is if it can be taken as a serious, criticism. I don't know.
Okay, so you can look at it two ways, right? One is, do you expect the author expected him to, um, I don't know, how do you say,
Yeah, I think Mani Ratnam being Mani Ratnam, maybe it is fair to expect him to use his cinema for greater cause. But I don't know if you should really hold him, accountable for not doing so. When you read about this caricaturing Annadurai or uh, dumbing down the whole George Reddy angle, except for being inspiration for Surya's character, the whole angle about Karunanidhi being shown as power hungry versus MGR and so on. I don't know. I mean, the arguments seem to be getting weaker as I read again and again.
okay, let me come back to it. So I was not actually going for that. I was actually going for a completely different angle. Okay, do you think the author feels Maniratnam should have shown a fair side of any ideology, both its upsides and its downsides, rather than just, reducing it to a trivial nature? Is that what he is hinting at? For example, you can say any ideology, whether it is the right wing or the left or the Dravidian ideology. Do you is he feeling pained because he feels that, Maniratnam just reduced Dravidian ideology to something like Hindi imposition, or uh, let us say வடக்கு வாழ்கிறது தெற்கு தேய்கிறது? uh, do you think that is where Maniratnam lacked, where he did not show the ideology in its full picture, both its upside and its downside? He doesn't have to be a propagandist, right? At the end of the day, as a filmmaker, that is not his job.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, right? So the criticism seems to be that he has not touched any serious issue in any depth, but used mostly as some sort of superficial references in his movies. That if that is the criticism, I would probably agree with that. But to your point, has he done it with pretty much any ideology? If you pick, say, leftist or Dravidian or say right wing Hindutva, that's probably true. But to say that he has favored the right because his movies focus more on the left and the Dravidian ridicule, that seems little far fetched. But let me ask you, I mean, um, is it unfair to expect Maniratnam to be a Par Ranjit?
I think it would be unfair to expect any filmmaker to be like anybody else.
No, I mean, Maniratnam being, the person he is, should they, make movies which answer some of these bigger questions, or at least help people explore this set of questions? I want to compare it with Kamal, right? So, whatever happened with the commercial failure of Heram and so on, it's going to be a movie that is going to be talked about for the next 100 or 200 years, right? But at least he took a stand, and you know where he stands. Is that the biggest criticism of the article? The dumbing down of the so called important questions of our times, but still somehow Maniratnam getting away so much credit for having touched all the subjects that no other filmmaker has done. In other words, has he played too safe and still has gotten so much credit for something that he doesn't deserve?
Yeah, I do think that is a very precise and concise summary. And I also feel that this is a good logical point to stop this discussion, because I think if we don't, we will just end up discussing for hours and hours together about Mani Ratnam's movies and what is the possible right wing or left wing allegiance in those. I think this is a good point to stop, and maybe we can look forward to the comments or feedback that our listeners have on what they think about any patterns or any sort of allegiance that they've spotted in Mani Ratnam's movies. Yeah, so that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to this episode of South Talkies. If you like this discussion, please click on the like button and share it with your friends using the share option. For regular updates, do subscribe to our channel on your favorite podcast listening platform. It could be Spotify, it could be Google Podcasts, or it could be Apple Podcasts. If you have a movie or a topic in South Indian movies you would like us to talk about, do tweet to us at the South Talkies on Twitter and also follow us on our Twitter handle. Until we come back with a new episode, have fun and have a great day. Bye.